Kenyans in diaspora have gone through a lot, particularly when it comes to getting scammed when investing back home. There was this article that was done by the Daily Nation that was specifically highlighting a certain real estate investment company here in Kenya that is currently facing controversy. Now, this company has been specifically targeting Kenyans in the US as their target market. There are two cases that involve this company. I'll call this company XYZ Limited. So in the first case, let's call our investor John. John wanted a 3-bedroom bungalow that was going for around 8.95 million Kenyan shillings. So he went ahead and made a deposit of 2 million Kenyan shillings. Construction was supposed to start, but it never started. He reached out to the company, but they were quite unresponsive and they were inconsistent in their communication. So that's how he was able to spot the red flags, and eventually he had to hire a private investigator and an advocate. In the investigation, they found out that that land where his 3-bedroom bungalow was going to be constructed did not belong to that company. It belonged to another company. So he wanted to opt out. He wanted his 2 million shillings back. He actually got a refund that was less than the 2 million. So that's when he had to have the courts involved, and eventually he was refunded. There's also another case. Let's call our investor James. James was interested in a 3-bedroom house that was going for 8.2 million Kenyan shillings. James went ahead and made a deposit of 4.2 million Kenyan shillings. According to the contract, construction was supposed to start within 90 days, but it started a year later. So now the company, XYZ Limited, was demanding that James should pay the remaining amount of money, which he was reluctant because, one, the company had breached their contract. They did not start the construction on time, and that's how he got the courts involved. I'm going to leave a link to that article in case you're interested in reading it. Now, there's also another case that is not related to this. It dates back to 2022, where we had a Kenyan investor. She lived in the Netherlands, and she was also interested in a piece of property here in Kenya. She made the deposit, the company was unable to pay, and later on when the courts intervened, that company had to be liquidated. The assets of that company had to be sold for her to recover her money. So where did the money go to? If you are a Kenyan resident, I bet that you know someone, or probably you have been a victim to real estate scams. You probably know someone who was sold land that had a fake title deed, or that land belonged to someone else and it was being resold for the 3rd time, for the 4th time. You know someone who was sold public land and they lost their money, they lost their investment. So they are not unique to diaspora investors. But diaspora investors are the main targets. Okay, probably not the main, but they are targets because of two things. One is because they live abroad. They live far. It's difficult for someone who is living in Australia, somebody who is living in the UK, to keep coming back to Kenya and following up on that piece of land. It's costly. It costs time other than money. And the other one is because most Kenyans living in diaspora want to come back home. I have had the pleasure of having clients in diaspora, and most of them want to come back home. In fact, they have a timeline. Some of them want to come back home in the next 3 years, in the next 5 years. By the time they hit 50, they want to have a home back in Kenya. They want to have investments when they come back home. And it's this same dream that is being taken advantage of, because you have worked so hard for 10 years, for 20 years, for 30 years. You have saved up your money. You now want to come back home to a nice piece of property, which brings me to another point. Is it true for me to say that Kenyans in diaspora have higher standards, they have higher expectations most of the time, not all of the time, than Kenyans or Kenyan residents? Most Kenyan residents and not all Kenyan residents. So is it true that the exposure that Kenyans in diaspora have makes them sensitive? For example, you see in that case for James took it seriously that this company did not start their construction within 90 days. It was a big deal. Whereas for us here in Kenya, it's a big deal, but we have accepted it. We have normalized it, partly because It's not just a norm, but it's because of the systems which are against us. Imagine going to court and even affording a legal team to look into such a case where the contract was breached. It's too costly for some of us to afford. Let me give you another example to illustrate this. I saw an article where in the US, the Justice Department accused 6 major landlords of keeping rents high. Imagine being taken to court for such a case here in Kenya. Is it possible? Yes, it is, but it's hard. Let me show you another one. I was having a conversation with a Kenyan who lives in the UK, and she was telling me that, of course, rent in the UK is high. If you're a tenant and you can't afford to pay your rent, you just can't be evicted by your landlord or by your landlady anyhow. There's this legal process that you have to follow. 1, you have to send a written notice to quit at the right time. You, as a landlord, as a landlady, you have to write a written notice to this tenant who hasn't paid rent for the last 3 months, for the last 2 months. And 2, you have to apply for a court order if the tenant does not leave. 3, you have to ask the courts to enforce the order. So you can't enforce that order. It's the courts who do that if the tenant still does not leave. So if you go ahead and breach this process, the tenant who has rent in arrears can sue you and benefit, yet they were the ones who are unable to pay the rent, which I don't think it's possible here in Kenya. It is possible, but it's rare. It's rare. And it's part of the institutions that we have, the weaknesses that are in the system. So this is what I'm talking about, that as a Kenyan living in diaspora, you have been exposed to such standards. I was having a conversation with a real estate investor here in Kenya. So what she does is that she invests in apartments, she buys apartments and rents them out. And she just doesn't buy an apartment, an already constructed apartment. What she does is that she pays a real estate investment contractor who does everything. So she makes the deposit before the unit is actually constructed. They sign a contract that within let's say within 3 months, construction is going to start. And she was lamenting that the contracts are never adhered to. Is that opportunity cost? That 10 million that she has already deposited could have given her more money or some money had she invested in a financial asset for those 3 years, for those 2 years that construction hasn't started. And she even gave me some few names in case it's an investment that I want to make, that there are certain reputable companies that she has worked with, that she knows that they're going to start construction on time. This is her experience. And she can't take legal action. Yes, she can. It's just that it's expensive. And again, the processes, the institutions that we have, they are not as efficient as the countries in which Kenyans in diaspora live in. I was also having a conversation with a Kenyan in the US, and he was telling me that the reason why medical services there are at par than in Kenya, it's because of the legal process. Imagine in countries like the US, suing somebody is normalized. Let's say that you go to a hospital for a dental procedure and the procedure is not done as it should have been done. You can actually sue the hospital. Is that suing culture? There are those standards that Kenyans abroad have been exposed to, which I would consider to be advantageous for any business here in Kenya, because if you can actually deliver quality services, if you can actually provide quality goods and services, if you can uphold integrity, it will make you stand out. Anyway, here are 3 recommendations for anyone who wants to invest in real estate in Kenya, whether you are a Kenyan in diaspora or you're a Kenyan resident. 1 is that hire a private investigator if you can afford. Let the investigator do some background check. I saw a clip on YouTube where an African American who has relocated here to Kenya was talking about how she finds it risky investing in land, like just buying land, and she prefers buying an apartment than buying a piece of land and building her dream house there. And her reasoning was that if you're going to buy a piece of property that already has a house, it's more safe because you can always check the records and see who constructed this house. You can always backdate the information other than just buying bare land in as much as it's cheaper. The other tip is that always have a written contract. Always have something that can allow you to go to court and get justice. And finally, avoid making investments with family and friends who have a track record of scamming you. Let me leave it at that. Have you been scammed?